My parents abandoned me at a remote campsite with a note saying, "Find your own way home." I never looked back. 10 years later, they came begging for $150,000, and I gave them an offer they'll regret forever. Hey there, I'm Brian, and I'm 30 now. I'm the head of a survival skills training company, which might seem a bit out of the ordinary, but once you hear my story, it'll all make sense. You see, I didn't have what you'd call a typical childhood. My parents had this wild idea that the only way to raise a tough, resilient kid was through heaps of hardship. So, from the get-go, I had to fend for myself in ways most kids never would. No help, no hugs, just nonstop life lessons, as they like to call them. But then came one summer when I was 18, and they decided to really push the envelope. It was a hot, lazy afternoon, the sun beating down mercilessly, when they drove us out to this lonely campsite for the weekend. Just me, Emily, my older sister, and our parents, Richard and Diane. A camping trip wasn't something we did often, so it already felt a little off. We didn't see another soul out there, just miles of untouched wilderness. We set up our tent and had a basic lunch of cold sandwiches and some bottled water. The vibe was strange. My parents were oddly chill, no usual nagging about my so-called laziness. My dad, lounging back, casually told me to go get firewood for a campfire. Emily gave me a quick look. There was concern in her eyes, but she stayed silent. My mom joined in, her voice gentle for once, telling me it wouldn't take long. So I set off down a narrow trail, figuring I'd be back in under 15 minutes. Except finding dry branches was harder than I thought, and all the while I felt this gnawing unease. When I finally made it back, the campsite was wiped clean. No tent, no car, no parents or Emily. Just silence and a note on a rock where we'd be in eating. "Find your way home. This is your lesson." At first, I thought it had to be a prank or maybe they'd just relocated nearby. But when I called out for them, nothing answered but the wind. My phone signal was spotty, but I finally managed to reach my mom. When she answered, she acted like they were doing me a favor, said it was for the best. I realized then that I needed to escape this so-called family, but first I had to get out of the woods. I headed down the trail, trying to get a stronger phone signal. Eventually, I managed to call 911, telling them I was stranded and needed help. "Stay put," they said, "and wait for the park patrol." It felt like ages, just sitting there, waiting, thinking about how this was actually a turning point for me. A bit later, a black SUV drove up, and I knew it was the start of a new chapter, one without them. As I watched, two officers emerged from their vehicle, their uniforms proudly displaying the county sheriff's department insignia. The first officer was a rugged-looking man in his 40s, the kind of man who seemed like he'd seen a lot in his years on the force. Beside him was a younger officer who was probably still new to the job. His face was fresh and eager, and he carried himself with the characteristic uncertainty of a rookie. "Brian Miller?" the older officer asked, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings with a practiced ease, clearly assessing the situation with the experience that came from years on the job. "Yes, that's me," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the tension I was feeling. I could feel my nerves on edge, but I was determined to maintain my composure. The older officer gave me a quick once-over, assessing my condition. "Are you injured?" he asked. I shook my head, my grip tightening around my phone. "No, I'm fine. My parents, they left me here." The younger officer's brow furrowed and his expression showed surprise at my words. "Abandoned you?" he repeated, as though trying to process what I had just said. I nodded, feeling both embarrassed and angry. "Yeah. They drove off and left me a note, told me to find my own way home. They've pulled stunts like this before." The two officers exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them. Then, the older one spoke again. "All right, we're going to take you back to the station. You can call a relative from there, and we'll be contacting your parents." 30 minutes later, I found myself seated inside the quiet confines of the police station, the air filled with an eerie stillness. A steaming cup of coffee sat in front of me, untouched. I wasn't supposed to be here. This was the consequence of my parents' decision. As soon as I arrived, I reached out to Uncle Jack, the only person in my family who had ever dared to speak out against my parents' unconventional ways. Meanwhile, another officer was on the phone with my parents, trying to make sense of the situation. 2 hours dragged on before they finally showed up. My parents, Richard and Diane, entered the station with not even the slightest hint of worry etched on their faces. There was no regret, no panic about abandoning their son alone in the woods. Instead, they seemed more irritated than anything else. Right behind them, Uncle Jack walked in, his face tense and ready for confrontation. One look into his eyes told me he was bristling with anger, ready to defend me. The officer behind the desk spoke up, his tone calm yet authoritative. "Are you the parents of Brian Miller?" My father crossed his arms and nodded. "That's right. Is there a problem?" The officer glanced down at the report in front of him before looking up again. "The problem is that your son called 911 after being left alone at a remote campsite. According to the report, you drove off without notifying him. Is that correct?" My mother sighed, crossing her arms with evident annoyance. "Yes, that's correct. But he's 18 now, so we don't see this as abandonment. We were teaching him a real-life lesson." That sentence hit me like a slap to the face. My fists clenched under the table as I struggled to keep my temper in check. The officer cocked his head slightly, his tone deliberate. "Are you aware that your actions could be considered abandonment of a dependent? He had no transportation, food, water, or immediate way to contact anyone." My father scoffed, his voice dismissive. "He's not a child. He's more than capable of taking care of himself. We did nothing wrong." Uncle Jack, who had been seething in silence until now, suddenly slammed his hand down on the table. "Nothing wrong, Richard? You left your son stranded in the woods like a reckless fool. Do you even understand what boundaries are?" My mother shot him a glare, her tone sharp. "Stay out of this, Jack. This isn't your business." "Not my business?" Uncle Jack's laugh was bitter and incredulous. "Do you know how many years I've warned you about this behavior? Do you really think parenting means dumping your kid in the wilderness and telling him to fend for himself? This isn't military training." My father's arms folded tighter across his chest, his voice icy. "He's 18. He can handle himself, can't he?" The officer leaned forward, interlocking his fingers. "You're right about one thing, Richard." His gaze was fixed firmly on my father. "Brian is 18, which means you no longer get to decide for him." The room went silent, and the impact of his words left my parents stunned. They stared at the officer as if he had just shattered their illusion of control. Uncle Jack turned to me, his voice gentler now. "Brian, you can come home with me. You don't have to endure this any longer." I met his gaze and, for the first time that day, felt a flicker of safety. But just as I was about to respond, my mother's voice cut through the air, shrill and adamant. "No, he is our son. He's coming home with us." The officer redirected his gaze to her, his tone sharper than ever. "No, Diane. As you just acknowledged, Brian is 18. That means the choice is his now." After the officer's definitive words, I needed no further prompting. I stood up, my decision clear and unwavering, and walked straight to Uncle Jack's car. My parents remained frozen in place, stunned by a reality they had never considered. They had always believed they could control me indefinitely, but this was the moment they realized they had lost what they saw as their property. Uncle Jack followed behind me, offering a reassuring pat on my shoulder. I didn't need to look back, but I did. I turned to face them, Richard and Diane, the people who gave me life but never truly treated me as their son. "Consider me dead from the moment you left me in that forest," I said, my voice eerily calm but each word as sharp as a blade. My mother's mouth fell open, struggling to find words, but nothing came out. My father stood there, expressionless, but I could sense he was shaken deep down. I turned away and continued walking. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to hold me back. That night, sleep eluded me. Uncle Jack's house was peaceful, yet everything inside my head was unbearably loud. Memories replayed in my mind like an old film on a loop, unearthing scenes I had worked hard to forget. I remembered the time my Motze there deliberately left me behind in a supermarket. I was only 10 years old. One moment I was holding her hand, the next, she disappeared into the sea of people. I panicked, running through the aisles, calling for her through tears. When I finally found her 15 minutes later and broke down, she stood there, arms crossed, completely unfazed. "You found your way, didn't you? Good. Now you know how to take care of yourself." There was no hug, no apology, just cold indifference as though I were nothing more than an animal being trained. When I was 12, I asked Emily for help with my homework. When my parents found out, they were furious. "No one can help you with your homework," my father had shouted. "If you can't figure it out alone, you deserve to fail." That night, they forced me to study alone until 2 a.m. No textbooks, no guidance, just the dim glow of a lamp and numbers I couldn't comprehend. Emily was punished too, simply for helping me. At 16, I had a high fever. My head spun, my body burned, and I was too exhausted to even sit up. I begged my mother to let me stay home from school, but she refused. Her voice was as cold and detached as ever. "Life doesn't stop just because you're not feeling well. Get up." And so I dragged myself to school. By noon, I could no longer endure it and collapsed onto my desk, my whole body trembling. The teacher had to call the nurse, and it was only when the school reached out that my mother finally came to pick me up. But she never asked if I was okay. She was just angry that I had inconvenienced her during work hours. And now, at 18, they had abandoned me once again. Exhausted, I drifted into sleep without realizing it. The following day, my parents showed up at Uncle Jack's house around 8 a.m., their loud, impatient knocks resounding through the door. There was more frustration in their actions than there was concern. I sat in the kitchen, gripping my coffee cup with no intention of getting up. Outside, my father's voice echoed, loud and irritated. "Jack, open the door. We need to talk to Brian." Uncle Jack sighed, setting his newspaper down before standing up. He paused before opening the door, glancing back at me silently to see if I wanted to confront them. I said nothing, just shook my head in response. The door swung open, and Uncle Jack, he was steadfast, his voice firm as he told my mom that he didn't want to see her. Determined, she tried to push past him, insisting, "He's our son. He belongs at home with us." Uncle Jack stood his ground, his eyes cold. "You still have the nerve to call him your son? You left him in the woods and now you expect everything to be all right?" he retorted, his voice dropping to a serious tone. My dad's forehead creased as he tried to maintain a calm demeanor, though his irritation was evident. "It was just a lesson, Jack. You're blowing this way out of proportion." Uncle Jack let out a sharp, humorless laugh, his eyes filled with disdain. "A lesson? That could have ended with your son dead in those woods, Richard." My mom crossed her arms defiantly. "This isn't your business, Jack. Stay out of our family matters." Uncle Jack took a deep breath and then spoke with deliberate emphasis. "No, Diane. The moment you left Brian out there and he had to call 911 to save himself, it stopped being just your family's affair." Silence fell. For the first time, they had no response. Uncle Jack's patience had run thin. "Anything else? If not, leave." They lingered for a moment, seemingly waiting for something that never came, and finally, my mom turned away, pulling my dad along. They stepped off the porch, got into their car, and drove away. That was the last time I saw them for some years. The image of them leaving Uncle Jack's house with only their pride and failure stayed etched in my mind. 2 weeks later, I received an email confirming my acceptance into the University of California, Berkeley's business administration program. I was in disbelief, blinking a few times and rereading it to make sure I wasn't dreaming. Once it sunk in, I set my phone down, taking a deep breath to process the news before sharing it with Uncle Jack. He was tinkering with an old radio in the living room, a soft click echoing as he secured a loose screw. He glanced up at me, his eyes curious. "I got in," I said, my voice calmer than I expected, though I felt a storm of emotions inside. Uncle Jack studied me briefly, then gave a slight nod, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly in a proud acknowledgement his way. "Good. Now pack up. I'll help you move into the dorm." No over-the-top congratulations, no tears or dramatic hugs like you see on TV, just simple acknowledgement and trust, and that was enough for me. When I moved into my dorm, the only things I brought were a small suitcase and a backpack. I unpacked on my own, taking in the modest yet peaceful room. There was no more tension hanging in the air whenever I entered a room, no more fear of being controlled or judged. But with freedom came responsibility. With no financial support from my family, I had to manage everything on my own. I secured a low-interest student loan to cover my tuition and immediately started hunting for a job. My shift began at 5 a.m. at a campus coffee shop, and the first few weeks were tough. Standing there, making coffee nonstop before sunrise wasn't easy, but I adapted. Having a packed schedule actually made me feel more grounded. On weekends, I'd catch the bus back to visit Uncle Jack. His house wasn't too far, just far enough to feel like a retreat from the hustle and bustle of college life. Uncle Jack welcomed me as if I'd never left. No lectures, no life lessons, no disappointed looks. Just a warm dinner, a cold beer on the table, and conversations where I didn't have to carefully choose every word. We'd chat about football, politics, or random happenings at school. And that's when I realized that family isn't about where you're born, but where you're valued. My college years were anything but typical. Between classes and part-time jobs to cover expenses, I spent most of my free time honing skills I believed would be practical someday. After my parents left me in the woods, I knew I had to learn to fend for myself. I devoured survival books, binge-watched wilderness survival documentaries, and studied techniques for extreme scenarios. The internet became my greatest resource. I taught myself everything from starting a fire without matches to finding clean water in the wild, even signaling for rescue without gadgets. The more I learned, the clearer it became that most people have no idea what to do in an emergency. One day at the cafe, I overheard customers talking about a hiker who got lost for 3 days in the woods, barely surviving by the time he was found. That's when it hit me. Why not use what I knew to help others? I started small, creating a YouTube channel to share crucial survival tips from books, videos, and my own experience. Initially, no one paid attention, but then one video, How to Survive If You Get Lost in the Woods, suddenly gained thousands of views. I kept posting short, simple tutorials from my old phone and soon realized how many people were interested in survival skills. They weren't just for adventure. Anyone could end up in a life-threatening situation, and not knowing what to do could be disastrous. After graduating, I decided to take things further. With a bit of savings and a small loan, I launched a survival training company. At first, it was just me, handling everything from building the website to marketing and organizing the courses. I started with the basics: surviving if lost in the wild, navigating when disoriented, signaling for rescue, administering basic first aid without supplies. I didn't just teach theory. I offered hands-on training in real survival settings, pushing students to adapt. And it worked. Within a year, my company started gaining traction. Backpackers, hikers, even corporate teams looking for survival-based team-building experiences signed up. By the third year, I expanded, partnering with rescue organizations and emergency response teams. And that's when I realized everything I'd built began that fateful day at Bee Creek Campground. My parents thought they were breaking me, pushing me into hardship, but the lesson they forced on me became the bedrock of my success. I became self-sufficient just like they wanted, but not in the way they had imagined. During all those years of building my career, my parents never called or texted. No congratulations when I graduated, no curiosity about my job. It was as if I no longer existed, and honestly, I didn't care. I knew they were all right because of my sister Emily. Even though I cut ties with my parents, Emily and I stayed connected. We texted regularly, called sometimes, and met up whenever possible. Emily wasn't like them. She never agreed with how they treated me. Though she couldn't change it, she remained the one family member I cared about, and that was enough. At least, that's what I believed until a year ago, when they pulled me back into their drama on what was just another ordinary weekend. So there I was, chilling in my apartment on a quiet morning. I had this steaming cup of coffee in my hand while I casually flipped through the news on my laptop. Everything was peaceful until my phone started buzzing. I glanced over, and to my surprise, it was a name I hadn't seen pop up in like a decade: my mom's. I just froze for a moment, staring at it like it was some ghost from my past. It's been 10 whole years with no calls or texts, and now suddenly, out of the blue, they want something. Obviously, I didn't pick up. Instead, I silenced the phone, sipped my coffee, and went back to reading my newsfeed. I was curious to see how persistent they'd be. The phone kept buzzing. 5 minutes passed, then 10, 20. They just wouldn't quit. 40 minutes later, the call stopped. I checked my screen and saw 42 missed calls. It made me chuckle quietly to myself. Then a text message popped up saying, "Your father and I are in serious trouble. Please help us, Brian. Call us back as soon as you get this." I stared at it for a moment, but without a second thought, I deleted it. By noon, my sister Emily called me. Now, she never rang me up like this in the middle of the day, so I knew something was up. I answered, and she immediately cut to the chase with a tense but unsurprised tone. Brian, are you free? Let's meet at the usual spot. I paused for a brief second, then nodded. All right, 30 minutes. We met up at the cozy cafe we always hit up whenever something serious needed discussing. Emily had gotten there first and was seated in our regular corner spot when I walked in. She was gazing into the distance, lost in thought. I took a seat across from her and got straight to the point. What's going on? Emily looked up, pressing her lips to get there before speaking. It's about Mom and Dad, she said. I didn't react, just gave her space to continue. She took a deep breath and then spoke slowly. They tricked me into giving them money. They claimed it was for an investment, promised there'd be returns, but in reality, she hesitated, her eyes darkening. They gambled it away. I just sat there, waiting for more. Not only that, she continued, but they also took out a mortgage on the house. Her voice dropped, laced with anger. I overheard them talking, and that's when I realized they lost everything. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. They screwed themselves over and thought they could drag you down with them, I said. Emily nodded, but then she seemed even more distressed. Brian, she hesitated, then met my eyes. They've been watching you. I frowned. Watching me? Yeah, she confirmed. They know you're successful, independent, and making money. They were just waiting until you were rich enough to come for you. I tightened my grip around my coffee cup, irritation bubbling up inside me. So this was their plan all along? Con you first, then come after me? Emily nodded. And you know they won't stop. That's why I had to warn you, be careful. The very next day, they showed up at my company. After the barrage of calls yesterday and everything Emily told me, I sort of expected it. Initially, I thought about avoiding them. I had a packed schedule and zero interest in their drama. But then it hit me. I'd been running long enough. It was time to face this head on. They walked into my office looking just like I remembered. But I wasn't the one being controlled anymore. My mother forced a smile, her eyes attempting to look warm, while my father wore his usual serious expression, albeit with impatience written all over it. Brian, you look so different. How long has it been since we last saw each other? My mother's voice was overly friendly, almost fake. I leaned back, arms crossed. 10 years, I smirked. They hesitated briefly but quickly regained composure. How have you been? We've always thought about you, they said. I let out a sharp laugh, cutting through their act. Let's get to the point. Why are you here? My father sighed and leaned forward. The thing is, we made some bad investments. The bank is about to take our house. Can you help us with $150,000? I raised an eyebrow, then laughed, mocking their words. Bad investments? You mean investing in a casino, right? I know everything. There was nothing left for them to hide. I met their eyes, my voice firm and final. Go home. I don't have money to spare. As I said before, I died the day you left me in that forest. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The fake smiles vanished, replaced by anger and frustration. My mother crossed her arms, glaring, and my father's tone hardened as he stopped pretending to plead. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't be where you are today. Leaving you in that forest made you stronger, gave you the survival skills that got you here. I stared at him for a second, then burst into genuine laughter. Not because he was right, but because he actually thought that. Right then, an unexpected thought flashed through my mind. Revenge. I looked at them, and this time my smile was calculated. All right, I said, my voice eerily calm. You need $150,000 to get the house back, right? Fine. I'll give you $250,000. $150,000 to save the house, another $100,000 for your retirement. How does that sound? They froze for a moment, then, for the first time in entire conversation, my mother smiled. Brian, I knew you still cared about us, she gushed. My father nodded, skepticism replaced with satisfaction. But then I continued, however, I have one condition. The air in the room turned ice cold, silence stretching between us as they waited. I crossed my arms and looked them straight in the eye. I will abandon you in the forest. My mother's mouth fell open, and my father's face darkened. I spoke slowly and clearly, emphasizing each word. If you can find your way out within 3 days, I'll give you the money. There was a stunned silence, then my father slammed his hand onto the desk. You, his voice was low and seething. You ungrateful little bastard. Is this how you treat your parents? I shrugged. Your choice. No one's forcing you. Calmly, I pressed a button on my office phone. Security, please escort our guests out. 2 security guards stepped in, and my parents shot to their feet, faces red with rage. You'll regret this, my mother shrieked as they were ushered toward the door. I didn't respond, just leaned back, arms crossed, watching them be dragged out of my office the way they once left me behind. I thought that would be the end of it after they were kicked out of my company, but I clearly underestimated them. The next day, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. At first, I ignored it. I had a routine. Enjoy a quiet morning, make some coffee, and check my emails before diving into the day. But the calls kept coming, one after another. Then my security guard phoned. I frowned and picked up. Boss, we have a situation. His voice was tense. You might not want to come in today. Why? I asked, pausing. There's a mob of reporters outside. Cameras, microphones, a whole damn crowd. The media is after you. A wave of irritation rose in my chest. What the hell did they do now? Just then my phone buzzed again, my assistant. I picked up and her voice was shaky. Brian, have you seen the video? I frowned. What video? So the other day I got this video link sent to me. I took a deep breath and opened it up on my phone. Curious but kind of apprehensive. As soon as I clicked play, it hit me like a ton of bricks. My parents had totally re-edited the footage from yesterday. They'd cut out all the parts that showed them begging for money or talking about their gambling debts. No context at all about how they'd tried to manipulate me. And the part where I offered them financial help? Yeah, conveniently missing. Instead, there was just this one short clip of me sitting at my desk. My voice was cold and sharp as I said, I will abandon you in the forest. I'll give you the money if you survive for 3 days. And that was it. Just that one sentence. Out of context, it made me look like some heartless monster bent on revenge. Below the video, the comments were a wildfire of outrage. Who treats their parents like this? This guy got rich and forgot who raised him. And what a cruel, ungrateful son. I felt a chill spread through my body as I stared at the screen. It was clear they'd gone to great lengths to paint me as the villain. As soon as the video ended, my phone rang again. It was Uncle Jack. Brian, are you okay? He asked, his voice low and tense. He'd just seen the video too. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, assuring him I could handle it. Honestly, I wasn't surprised by his call. He knew I wasn't the kind of person portrayed in that video, but he also knew how ruthless the media could be. My parents hadn't needed me for the past decade, but now that they were cash-strapped, they had no problem smearing my name. I wasn't entirely sure what outcome they anticipated when they released that video, but if it was war they wanted, I was ready to fight back. After my call with Uncle Jack, I immediately dialed Emily's number. She picked up on the second ring, her voice filled with concern. Brian, she said, clearly worried. She must have seen the video too. I took another deep breath. Emily, will you help me? I asked. There was no hesitation in her response. Of course. Meet me at your office at 9:30. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. It felt good to know I wasn't alone. After hanging up with Emily, I called my assistant. She answered right away, her voice tense with worry. Boss, this is getting worse. The media is everywhere. They want a response. I leaned back in my chair, eyes focused. Invite every reporter into the company's conference room. I'll handle this at 9:30, I instructed. She hesitated. Are you sure? If this goes wrong, it could get even worse. A smirk played on my lips, my voice cold as ice. I've never been more sure. I hung up, grabbed my car keys, and left my apartment. Today, I wasn't going to run. Today, I was going to put an end to this. By 9:30 a.m., I stepped into the conference room with Emily beside me, the only family member I still trusted. In front of us, dozens of reporters sat waiting, cameras rolling, microphones ready. They were expecting a scandalous defense, maybe even a bigger controversy. But I wasn't there to play their game. As soon as the questions started flying, I raised my hand, a silent command for them to stop. I didn't need to say anything. At that moment, the large screen at the front of the room lit up, and a video began to play. It was the complete, unedited footage from yesterday. No cuts, no manipulation, just the raw truth captured by my office's security cameras. When the video ended, I looked directly at the reporters, my voice calm but razor sharp. This is the truth. You've all seen it. I've uploaded this video to my page. Feel free to download, wholesome, and share it. The room fell utterly silent for a moment, faces reflecting shock and realization. The journalists who had been quick to condemn me were now processing the fact that they'd been played. I shrugged, my tone void of anger, just stating the obvious. Even if they had agreed to my challenge, I never would have left them in the woods. All I needed was for them to say, "We accept your challenge," and they would have received $250,000 immediately. I let it sink in before continuing. But instead of taking that offer, they'd twisted the story to paint me as the villain. After I spoke, Emily stood up. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes were firm and unwavering. "They didn't just lie to the public, they lied to me," she said. "They took my money, promised it was for an investment, but in reality they gambled it away." She took a deep breath, her hands clenched at her sides. "I stayed silent for years, but today, I can't anymore." The entire room was dead silent as the reporters soaked in every word, capturing it all on their devices. Now, everyone in that room had seen the truth, and there was no going back from it. That afternoon, the media exploded. The same outlets that had labeled me an ungrateful son were now scrambling to correct themselves. The original video spread like wildfire, dragging along a wave of new headlines. Truth twisted. Parents edit video to destroy their own son. Who's the real villain? Brian's full story leaves the public in shock. Parents gamble away son's trust, all for money. I skimmed through few articles in my office but felt no satisfaction. I didn't need the media on my side. I just needed the truth to be known. I unlocked my phone and scrolled to my parents' numbers one last time before blocking them without a second thought. Finally, I deleted their numbers, just like how they'd erased me from their lives 10 years ago. Before leaving the office, I gave security one final order. If they come looking for me, turn them away. If necessary, call 911. I wasn't giving them another chance. This time, I was the one closing the door, and it would never open again. A year has passed since that day, and life has gone on smoothly, even better than before. My company is thriving, and I haven't been bothered again. Most importantly, I no longer think about them. But sometimes, news still finds its way to me, even when I don't ask for it. One afternoon, while sitting in my usual cafe, Uncle Jack called. "Brian, do you want to hear about your parents?" I was silent for a few seconds, then shrugged. "Sure, go ahead." He sighed lightly before telling me they had left town and moved elsewhere. No one knew exactly where, but it was clear they had lost everything. Through a distant relative, I heard their lives were miserable now. I didn't ask for details, and honestly, I didn't care. They made their choices, and this is my life now. So that's my story. It's come to an end, but now I want to ask you, my dear audience, what would you have done if you were in my position? Do you think I was too harsh, or did they get what they deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy stories like this, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next one. See you in the following story. Goodbye.